So welcome everybody. I am Maria O'Donnell. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm the chairperson of the Southwest Lean Forum. On today's call we have Brendan O'Reilly, who's the operations manager in CUH, and Brendan has a fabulous story to tell us about how they have use the lean tools to be able to maximize the delivery they have to their patients, but equally to run a more efficient and effective hospital for their staff. Before we go into it, I just want to tell you, for those of you who aren't aware, the Southwest Lean Forum is an industry-led forum, and our role is to share lean experiences and systems and learnings and best practice. We're built on 4 pillars: knowledge sharing, education, support, and networking. And today and all our other events over the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks are very much coming in under the knowledge sharing and education. Long before there was a hashtag "we're all in this together," it was actually one of the main ethos of the Southwest Lean Forum is that we collectively come together to share knowledge, so we can all progress in a positive and proactive way together. The Southwest Lean Forum is one of the regional networks under Lean Business Ireland. Lean Business Ireland was established in 2017, and its aim is to position Ireland as a recognised leader in lean enterprise excellence. There's regional networks all over the country, and during this COVID-19 crisis or pandemic, we have all come together nationally to do webinars on a Thursday, which are looking at national issues for businesses. So the one next Thursday evening at 6:30 will be asking the question, what are the smart people doing? How are they using lean tools to maximize their workforce and maximize their production in this pandemic? And all those details are on Lean Business Ireland. A little bit of housekeeping: we've put everybody on mute for the duration of this call, and please can you use the chat function if you wish to raise any questions. The video is being recorded and will be available to people afterwards if they request it, for sure, and it'll be available on leanbusinessireland.ie. So Brendan, without delaying any further, can you start? Can you tell us the story of what's been happening in the CUH since this pandemic kicked off?
Well, absolutely. Thank you. You're doing a great job, Maria, and thanks for the invitation. And I suppose thanks to all of you and to the public in general, because all of you are doing your part. Everyone here is doing their part, but you're doing your part as well by physical distancing and all that, and washing your hands. And that really is why we're at this place where we're now told we're at less than 1 on that R0 scale, which is a really good place to be. So I suppose I should start really by saying there's an element of confidentiality around what we do in the health service, and I would ask you to understand I'm not a formal how will I say it, advocate or a communicator for the hospital. I'm sharing some experiences here, but generally press releases is when I go through the press office, so just to be aware of that, and I would prefer not to be quoted out of context for that reason. So what I want to talk to you about is about flow, really, and it's something that occupies our minds all the time, especially at winter time, but all year round, really. Flow of patients and trying to keep things moving, doing what we can, doing the most for the most, and trying to run a very safe service under a lot of pressure, as I'm sure you'll know. We generally talk about flow under 3 kind of headings: capacity, processes, and enablers. And when I was thinking about what I might talk about today, I was thinking under those general headings, but I also added a heading of staff, because I think our staff are really such an important part of what we do, and for various reasons, you'll see that they've made a huge difference to all of this journey that we've been on. I suppose, like everybody else, we prepared for COVID from a very early stage. There was a huge ramp up of activity. We have a special entrance in A&E for people who come in contaminated with chemicals and so on. It's a different entrance because you don't want them coming through a regular entrance, and so we set that up for COVID, and we put in a ventilator and all this type of stuff, and we were all ready to go with COVID patients. And of course, the first COVID patient happened in-house. We realized we had one already in-house who who had presented with an unusual pneumonia and turned out to be COVID. So that turned things on its head a little bit for us and really for the country, because I think most people were preparing along those same lines for people to come in the door with query COVID. So it's been a great learning experience. I would love to say we've planned out our lean tools and our value stream maps and all that from the very start. I can't say we've done that, but I would say that a lot of people doing of this and making the changes around this have been people who have lean training and who have training under other kind of quality improvement methodologies. And in particular, Plan, Do, Check, Act has been something that we've been using a lot. But you will see the evidence of lean tools around the place, and you'll see that we're now starting to use lean tools formally to start the recovery phase, I suppose, which is a good place to be. In terms of staffing, I suppose the challenges have been personal protective equipment, and really we've been very fortunate to have industry links, some of whom are on here, I'm sure, and industry links locally, because we're in an international market looking for reagents for testing, looking for PPE, masks, gowns, goggles, face shields, and people have been very creative. I suppose I had an expectation really that industry would be able to flex around the needs of the customer, which is the lean philosophy, I suppose. And that's been met, actually. We've had people 3D printing visors for us. We've had people creatively creating goggles. We now have people creating gowns, which are a limitation for us as well. Masks are a bit more specialty items that are a bit challenging to create those, but we're working away on that as well, and we're trying to become self-sufficient for those, because the international market, there's a huge draw on it at the moment, and I'm sure you'll all have found that, anybody who's still relying on international supply chains. There's been a huge amount of training involved in what we're doing, in particular training on the use of PPE. And there's this idea, you might have heard about the China stuff, the China consignment coming in and it wasn't suitable. A gown that goes on the front of you is easy enough to take off safely without touching the outside of it. A full suit, while it might protect you better when you're doing your work, when you take it off, it's a bit harder to not contaminate yourself by touching the outside of it. So even though there's a perception that the suit is safer, it probably isn't the optimum thing for what we're doing, but it sometimes is all we have. So the PPE and the training around that has been critically important, and our in particular our nursing staff have been fantastic at doing that. We've also looked fairly creatively at more than doubling our ICU capacities. So we have 18 ICU beds in CUH. And just to remember that it's not just about ventilators or syringe pumps, it's about space. Are well used to dealing with patients who are, they're brought under and they're
Are people still with us? Can you give me a thumbs up if you're still with me, or even put yes in the chat? Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Still, but Brendan disappeared there for a while. I couldn't hear for the last 5
Absolutely. And Brendan, if you could just go back to, you were speaking about doubling the ICU capacity.
Yeah. So I mean, normally we have 18 ICU beds here, with the help of very flexible staff who have come from theatre to train on how to deal, because they're used to dealing with patients who are unresponsive and with a tube down. So they have retrained to work in ICU, which is a very different place to be, but they've done that. Our staff have been absolutely superb. There's been everybody has focused, and I suppose from a strategic point of view and an organizational deployment point of view, everybody's focused on the one goal, which is really fantastic. Often in health, you tend to get islands of, people who are interested in vascular surgery or cardiac surgery or whatever else it might be. But for this period, everybody has been focused on COVID and then keeping the other pieces ticking over as best we can. So that's been very useful. Staff have been very, very flexible. We've been getting good at physical distancing. We probably have a ways to go, but we've pulled tables out of our canteen, half the tables. We've put one-way lanes in the corridors. We have one specified lift for COVID activity and so on and so forth. So we've moved all of our meetings to online meetings as opposed to physical meetings as much as we can. And the daily huddle that we have, which is really communication huddle with a load of the major players in the hospital, about 40 people, we have in the lecture theatre, which is designed for 150 people. So we all sit fairly far apart in there, and it works fairly well. People have changed their shift patterns. They've started working on weekends. It's a little harder sometimes to work from home in the health service, but it's possible, and some people have been doing that. We've created a wobble room for people. So if a person has a wobble, if they have a really bad case, or they lose somebody, or something doesn't work out, or they've had a really hard decision, we have a quiet space for them to go to have a cry, or to have a reflection, or whatever else they might want to have. We changed the deployment of our doctors to deploying on wards now, as in a doctor would be assigned to a ward and own the patients on that ward. So each of our major wards, which are about 35 patients per piece, have 3 doctors. So instead of doctors running around the hospital doing things, and from a lean point of view, maybe doing a lot of extra steps that aren't needed, we now have doctors on the wards, and we're finding that discharge letters have being done earlier. People are there to make decisions on drugs faster, and so on, and the consultants can still come around and make their daily rounds and decisions and so on, but at least we have doctors there to make decisions and to spot deteriorating patients with the nurses and all that, and that's been working fairly well. One of those things I'd love to keep at the end of this. And I suppose that's the staffing side. In terms of capacity, we've created a pull system in the hospital. The first pull happened at the very start, where community services were fantastic. They helped us pull a lot of patients that didn't need to be in-house out to the community into various beds, and that made a big space in the hospital. We've also looked at refurbing space that was intended for clinical use and hadn't yet been put into use. So our estates people have been exceptional, I would say, in bringing that space into use. So we have a lot of additional capacity that we didn't have previously. We've moved to virtual clinics as opposed to for a lot of our clinics. It's not always possible, but for a lot of patients, it's a better thing for them because they don't have to leave their home. They just need to be available on a phone to take a call and talk through their symptoms. And sometimes it needs to be a physical presence, but because we've moved out patients off site, we've moved them out to make room for COVID assessment, and that we've had to rely on virtual clinics, and it's been a very positive thing for patients. We've converted our whole outpatient department, which sees 200,000 patients a year, into COVID assessment streams for adult and pediatric patients separately. And so if you come in the door now of A&E, instead of normally, you walk in and you go up to the reception and you give your name, now what will happen is you'll meet a senior decision maker, which is another change we've made. So you'll meet a person with a lot of experience who can make decisions on your care. If you have anything that resembles a COVID symptom, you'll be turning left and going to the COVID stream, which is our outpatients, for assessment, and you'll have a mask put on you and so on. If you jammed your car, your hand in the car door, and you don't have any symptoms, you'll turn right and go down to A&E. And if you're particularly sick as well with COVID, you'll also go to A&E because that's the best place for you to be. So we're streaming patients, and it's working quite well. So we have space on the wards. We're pulling patients up to the wards fairly fast. That clears up the COVID stream rooms, so we can pull patients in from A&E into those. So it's a pull system instead of our normal push, which is everybody waiting in the waiting room. We've also reduced scheduled activity, which is regular scheduled set about outpatients, but things like minor surgeries or things that can wait. We've been proceeding with time critical surgeries and of course emergency surgeries, but we've reduced some scheduled activity. That's something we can do for a short while. We can't continue that for good, so we'll need to keep a close eye on that. We've also, you know, we're always short of space in CUH, and people have occupied space that could be better used for clinical use. So we've cleared people out of those, moved them home, or moved them into other accommodation, and created additional clinical space that way. So it's been quite a change on the capacity side. On the process side, I mentioned the COVID streams and the senior decision maker at the door. We also have pathways for patients, so we know when a patient is query COVID, the route we're going to take to the ward. We're also with wards and areas designated for COVID. So we have specific routes for those. They're regularly cleaned. We have cleaning people who come in behind every patient to clean up the area they were in. So that whole process and stream works fairly well to protect the next patient who's coming in and so on. We also have a single lift. I mentioned that for COVID. And the other thing we're doing, because you'll become aware of community problems where a lot of residential homes are having challenges in spreading of COVID. So we're actually, our geriatricians are going out to help those homes and advise them. So there's a geriatrician assigned to the north of the Lee and a geriatrician to the south and one to Kerry. They're helping advise them, and the community services have come up with action teams who go into those homes as well to help them, and patients will get the level of care that they need. So if a patient will benefit from hospital care, the geriatricians and the operations team will say, yes, this person should be sent in for additional care. If they can get the care they need in the home that they're in, which is their residential home, they'll remain there. So it's the safest way of doing it, and it's helping to sort that problem out of community spread in the residential homes. And also, as I mentioned, the whole admission system and the whole process for bringing patients in has become a pull system, as opposed to what you'd have seen before, the trolley numbers, which is really a push system, the whole way through the system, even to egress. So that's been very good. I suppose the enablers that we've had, I mentioned capacity, process, and enablers. And the enablers, I mentioned the states as a huge enabler. They've been just exceptional. You know, you saw this thing where they've built a hospital in China. It's been at that level. It's been nothing is a no. Refurbishment, new builds, you name it, they've been exceptional. We've been very lucky with our links with industry in that, for example, we've been given an old nursing home to use for temporary outpatients. And again, the states have turned that around in 3 weeks into a clinical area. We've been given the use of that for 6 months by industry. Industry have also ramped up in a big way, providing masks and of course Easter eggs, right? So masks and goggles and all these things. It's been absolutely exceptional. Our links with UCC as well and research labs have allowed us to create reagents, chemicals that are used in the testing process. So you know, the support we've got has been exceptional, I have to say, and our own staff have met it with their own efforts. So laboratory diagnostics have been a huge enabler, because the faster we get a result, the faster we can say this patient is COVID and should be put into a COVID area. I will just advise you, of course, those results aren't completely infallible. You can get somebody who is COVID positive, who has COVID, but tests COVID negative. So what we do is, if a person looks like they have COVID, we still keep them in isolation until we're absolutely positive. So it's just to protect them and to protect other patients. So basically, it is as safe as usual to come to CUH. You'll be as protected as one normally would coming into the hospital. Procurement have been exceptional as well in their efforts. I sent a tweet out and it was well received. I think that they've been taking it personally, which is not a good way to say things, but they've been really taking a personal stake in their responsibilities in getting us the equipment we need. And it's come close to the line on occasions, but we have never been in a place where our staff have had to go in without gear, and we don't anticipate that we will be. It's been really, really good. Our metrics that we normally use for flow have been very useful, and we've developed additional metrics in terms of COVID numbers and numbers of ICU beds and this. So we rely a lot on metrics, and our daily huddle at 12, which is another lean tool that we use, uses those metrics. We share the metrics, so there's a lot of communication going on between all the staff, and it's been a huge leveler. I've never seen an event in 30 years in healthcare that has leveled the field in terms of people's roles. it doesn't really matter how important you might think you are, or whatever else. Everyone at the table has the same chance to say what they need to say, have an input. They will be listened to, and a lot of the changes that have happened have been because people on the floor have just made the change. They've just been really good, and they've had the freedom to do that, and they're hearing what's going on, and we are aligned with one organizational goal, really, or one major organizational goal. I mentioned our links with UCC and so on. Oc Health have been very good as well to help us protect our staff. So if somebody is symptomatic, they'll be taken off the field for a while. And we remain in contact with Oc Health then as to when it's safe for them to come back into work. And we've had very few staff in CUH, considering we have 3,500 staff who have had to self-isolate or go off because of a positive result. The leadership, this might seem self-serving, but the leadership in general in the organisation, from consultant leadership, from staff leadership, and from the leadership of the hospital, the CEO and the director of nursing and the whole team at the top, has been really good. It's been open communication. It's been willing to listen. It has allowed everybody who has an idea to come in and pitch it and do it. So it's been really useful, you know. To be fair to Paul Reid and the HSE and Department of Health nationally and so on, there's been no impediment put in our way in terms of recruitment or finance or anything else. We've had immense support, and from the hospital group as well. So it's been really good time for us. And as I mentioned, our industry links have been really supportive. And Gemba walks, which is something that myself and the interim CEO and the director of nursing have been doing for several months anyway. So we have a relatively new interim CEO here, Dr. Jared O'Callaghan. And we've done a lot of Gemba walks down in A&E and ICU and so on and so forth and up the wards. So we really do feel we know what's going on in those places, and we tend to go when there's a change to be made. We go to the area, we talk with the people on the floor, we make the change, we try it out. If it doesn't work, we change something over again, and it's quite fluid. It's PDCA type approach, and I hope that the staff would agree that they feel supported in that. And as I said, the horizontal structure of the organisation has been more evident than ever before in my experience. I suppose just to round up my thoughts on the thing, there's two areas I talk about. One is the next steps and the challenges that we're going to have in the coming months. It does seem as though we're plateauing to some degree. Everyone's afraid to say that, I suppose, because there's no guarantees about it. But certainly things have been fairly well managed, I think, nationally, and the public have played a fantastic role in that. Our challenges really are around PPE. We need to protect our staff. We've done a really good job of it so far, and we want to keep doing that. And industry support in doing that, and the responsiveness of companies to re-engineering the initial solution they gave us and so on has been exceptional, really. So keeping our supply chains and maybe not relying as much on international supply chains is probably a very good thing for us to do. And we are starting to think about the recovery phase, and mixed in with that will be engineering in a lean way and having an opportunity to learn from what's worked well in this and what maybe we always wanted to change and seemed to be a barrier, but we were able to do it fast when we needed to. And so learning from that. And of course, at some point, there'll be a huge immunization program, which is probably a year off. So I suppose I reflected, and only yesterday I was invited to a group where we're looking at where we're going to go next with all of this and what we're going to learn from it and new ways of working and so on. And I had reflected just this week about 10 things I'd like to keep when we're finished with all this. And I suppose the first thing really was a sense of humor and a sense of civility maybe to each other, and parity of professional esteem and that, because I think there's a huge respect developed and humility developed in the organization as a result of this. I think the idea of senior decision making at the front door at triage is a really critical one, a very important one, and I think we need to keep that. I do think we need to keep an eye on virtual working opportunities and virtual OPD. It suits people in their lives. I think it's a more lean way of doing things, and when necessary, bring them in on site. The additional capacity, I hope we get to keep that and staff it, because we need staff for these things as well. I really hope we can stay at 0 trolleys. We've been 0 trolleys for a couple of months now. I'd love to think that would be the case, and certainly we do not want to go back to a place where we have any trolleys, and that, well, we'll see how that goes, I guess. I would love to see the implementation of Sláinte Care, which has started to happen through the use of private hospitals as Section 38s. I'd like to think that would continue in some form so that we can make better use of all the available facilities for all patients and not have streams of public versus private. I suppose on a kind of very practical point, I'd like to see scrubs stay in for all clinical staff. It hasn't been the case, and proper showering and changing facilities. Those are small things, but we're certainly working to get that done as part of all of this. I'd like to retain the flat organizational structure that we've had in the middle of all of this, which has been really useful, and I think staff feel empowered on it. I'd like to retain all our staff and ban the term frontline staff. I think the idea that anybody is frontline suggests that somebody's backline, and I'm not sure that's a really useful distinction. We've learned, maybe we already knew, but certainly publicly now we've learned that the retailers, the taxi drivers, the logistic chains, the supply chains, the cleaners, the porters, the radiographers, everybody as part of this effort is frontline. So you might use the term patient-facing and non-patient facing, but I'd love to see the term frontline banned and the same respect applied for all of our staff. And the other thing, of course, I'd like to keep is Gemba walks and going to see, and maybe not waiting necessarily for perfect. You know, don't necessarily aim for perfect. Aim to improve, and then aim to improve again and continually improve. And that's the approach we've been taking, just getting it done and getting the improvement, and then trying to improve on that. And that's kind of the story so far. And I probably hand back to Mairead, and maybe I've talked myself out, have I?
No, Brendan, you know, that's really, really wonderful to hear what's been happening. I suppose, with the want for a way better word than frontline, but what's been happening in reality throughout this, because there's some of us that, you know, haven't left our homes, and there's some of us that, you know, are living in small communities, and I suppose that bit isolated from the reality of how things have been impacted in the hospitals. You know, I suppose Hilary has a very good question there, and in line, I suppose, I think we're all probably thinking the same. How widespread is the knowledge of lean within CUH prior, or how widespread, apologies, how widespread was the knowledge of lean within the CUH prior to COVID? And Hilary's point is that she presumes that COVID has removed what would have been traditional barriers to change within the environment. Do you think that that positive engagement to change are here to stay? I suppose, you know, there's a point. Yeah. Do you want to answer that before I?
Yeah, it's a very good point. Yeah, I would say the knowledge of lean, people understand what it's about. There are people who would be skeptical, like in every other organization. I would have to say, and I've shared this with Mark in the past, the deployment of lean here has not been formal, and it hasn't been done as a formal deployment of lean across the whole organization. It's not a religious type thing. I would say there are a lot of lean trained people, so there's a lot of awareness of lean. There have been a lot of successful projects. Just before Christmas, we asked for people to present quality improvement projects to the staff in the canteen for Lent, or for Advent rather. So we were planning to have 2 per day in the whole Advent season. We had a huge influx, but we couldn't cope with all the projects that came in. So there's a lot of lean work being done. It's been done in islands, but I suppose the philosophies of lean, in terms of pull, in terms of engagement and trying to satisfy what the customer needs, in our case the patient, that's certainly there. I wouldn't say it is. I think it's more of a QI philosophy than specifically a lean philosophy. But for example, the use of PPE, one of the things we've done only this week is to set up a small group of people who are lean trained to look at the optimum use of PPE. So for example, if you can use the same PPE for multiple patients and it's safe to do that, well, you save PPE. And so looking at that, looking at Kanban for it, and looking at supply chains and all that. So there's a group of people doing that. And I feel the recovery phase that I mentioned, we now have a chance to do it formally and properly using value streams, the optimum reuse of space and the re-engineering of the space we have, because we're not going to be able to turn off our lean our COVID stream very fast. COVID is going to be with us for quite a long time, so we'll need to keep query COVID patients separate from non-query COVID patients. And so ramping up outpatients again is going to be a challenge. So the whole reuse of space, the whole return to what we will call a normal service, we have a chance to do with lean now, and we might now do that formally as opposed to organically like we've done it for the last 2 months. Does that answer the question?
I think it absolutely does. I think it also leads on to a further question. There's an element on these webinars that almost we're preaching to the converted, and COVID seems to have, given an opportunity of "we told you so," especially in the context of lean. But I suppose that there's a danger of us thinking that COVID has encouraged a utopian type of hospital, because you now have zero trolleys. You've more engaged staff that are more emotionally engaged. As you said, you've created virtual clinics where people don't have to leave their home. Community nursing is being engaged at a more brilliant level, really. You've senior decision makers at the front making sure that nothing is going where it shouldn't be. You're maximizing resources. Not only is there an appetite to keep going with this utopian style, but is there a commitment, I suppose, when things go back to the new normal? Is our senior management in the hospital, and I suppose you being one of those, is there a commitment to trying to maintain this, but equally reinstate the services that have been as a consequence, such as the outpatient?
Well, I suppose there is the short answer. As recently again as this week, the executive medical director of our hospital group, Dr. Julie McCarthy, who's a lean advocate herself and has done lean training herself, has asked myself and a few others to get involved in a group, coincidentally on those 10 things I wanted to retain, to look at what has worked well and what we should retain, including the likes of senior decision making at the front door and that. So the opportunity to reinvent it is certainly there at executive level. There's no doubt about that. And the optimum use of space and the optimum use of new space that has been brought into play. Whether it's there at the whole organization level, I would say that to be fair to services, if you're hired as an endocrinologist, you will advocate for your patients in endocrinology, and that is what we want you to do. We're paying a good money to do that, and your endocrinology patients will want it. I think what might be different, or I hope, or better maybe after this, is that there are so many clinicians now who are involved at executive level and have been brought into the executive discussions and so on, that I would hope people would have an understanding, first of all, of limitations, because of course there will be limitations in the future as to what we can do, and they will have a voice, and we will be able to prioritize. So yeah, utopian, I'm not sure if I'd use that term, but certainly the idea of no trolleys is very appealing. But it's our chance now to, for instance, use some of the additional space for surge in the mornings, as opposed to allowing anybody lying on a trolley, which nobody wants to do that, So there's an uncertain future for all of us, isn't there? A reinvented future where we'll have a very different approach to socialization, I suppose, even in the community. But I think there is the opportunity amongst that whole reorganization of services and ramping back up our routine services to allow everybody a chance to shape that. And I think we're very receptive to it. And I think this is the best opportunity. Will we get it 100% right? No doubt there'll always be room for improvement. Does that answer your question?
No, I think it does, for sure. And if anybody has any questions, feel sure to use the chat function there to the side. I suppose, Brendan, we know that lean is centered on people and people coming together and people working together in the best way possible that utilizes their skills. It sounds like COVID has almost created the wonderful opportunity for unity of staff, but equally an opportunity for staff to be agile, to lead at their best, to bring their own skills forward. I suppose while you don't want people to be personally involved, I suppose that personal involvement means that they're operating at a more emotionally involved level, so they're more invested in what's happening. Is there a way to, are you guys working on a way to ensure that that's capitalized on and maintained going forward? I suppose from engaging your employees.
Well, I would say that's been going on all the time, actually. And our Advent calendar showed us that. It showed us that departments independently are always continually improving. We have healthcare professionals here at all grades and all professions and disciplines, and they all want to do right by the patient. And what this has done maybe has shone a light on that, I think, and it has aligned us to a particular goal, which was dealing with the COVID crisis. The key now will be making sure that the door is open for those people to tell us about those projects, tell us about those plans, and for us to support them. And I do generally think, and of course I'm seeing it from the exec side maybe, but I do think we've been pretty good at supporting projects in general. But I think this will shine a light on all that good work that's been done already. I mean, we have exceptional staff, and everyone says that it does mean something. And thanking them, which we like to do face to face on Gemba walks, is really important. So I think we're kind of there already, but we just need maybe better communication around it. And this has been a good opportunity for that, I think. I don't know if that addresses your...
It does, but equally it's, you know, it has been a wonderful opportunity for the entire nation to show the true belief they have in people who are providing our healthcare services for us. Not just patient facing, but equally the support teams that make it all happen. Richard Keegan has a wonderful question here for you, Brendan. He said, sharing between specialisms is great. What about benchmarking along specialisms between hospitals?
Not sure I understand the question now. Do you want to?
I wonder, can we bring Richard in there, Senan, if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, he's off mute there now. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Richard.
How you doing, guys? Thanks very much for this so far, Brendan. It's been lovely to hear what's been happening.
Thank you. Yeah.
I also asked a question about, did you know Ollie Plunkett in the HSE?
Ollie Plunkett. The name is familiar. I'm not sure who he is now.
Yeah, he's heading up the Lean initiative in the HSE.
All right, nationally, is it? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I was particularly interested to hop onto this particular talk today, and thanks for everybody for organising it, particularly Mairead for chairing the session. Your focus, you made the point there about the endocrinologists are advocating for their patients, same as the cardio, same as the respiratory, same as everybody.
Yeah.
And that leads to necessary tensions within CUH, right? So there's a fight for resource. There's who's pushing for their own particular specialism. And that's normal. That's good. That's the way it needs to be, because there is a limited resource. It's not an unconstrained resource. But the potential, if you look at the HSE published data in terms of length of stay, arriving on day of procedure, etc., all the metrics that are there, but the 50th or 60th page in on the metrics.
Yeah.
If you look at the spread of performance, and I'm tying it into the great wealth of innovation you've got from your people now. If you look at the spread across the hospital network across Ireland, there are significant variations in length of stay, arrival on day of surgery, recidivism, etc., etc.
Yes, yeah.
And if we could collectively move to Yucatan to balancing up the knowledge we have and sharing the knowledge we have, and simply just doing the Yucatan of what has been learned, the potential to create capacity, which is, you know, your opening point was community gave you capacity by taking people out. If we could achieve the poor performers, and I don't mean that negatively,
no,
right? But hospitals that might be under-resourced by a key person or a key understanding the use of triage, right, which you've said is one of your key keepers. If we could get a sharing of what we know in Ireland across the network, so the endocrinologists, while fighting for their piece of ground in CUH, but across the country, actually shared what they knew. There's the potential for a significant uptake.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there are standards of care in a lot of cases, and you're right. I mean, one of the things I was talking about, retaining the slant care kind of model. This is what if I were to flesh that out, I would say that we're a hospital group, and it would be good to look at it reducing duplication of work across that group. CUH has 43 specialties, I think, on site, and it's very hard then to prioritize all of those in a given year. So you tend to say to do it on a project basis and try and say, so we have a cardiac renal tower, for instance, here, and that was a great investment in that service. We recently opened the Glandore Centre for Oncology, which was another great investment in oncology, and there's more to do. So I suppose it is difficult when you have 43 to look after all of them, but the best way of doing that then is to look across the region. Certainly, nationally is probably more challenging, but certainly worth doing. Absolutely right. And trying to standardise the experience for patients, no matter where they are in the country, because things often tend to be Dublin centric, as you probably know. But there's a very different dynamic in Dublin in terms of public voluntary hospitals for the most part, as opposed to public ones, and in terms of specialty services in one hospital and not in others, and so on. And there's an opportunity to learn from that, I think, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Brendan, and thanks, Richard. It's wonderful to have you on the call, but equally to have your contribution is very valuable. I have a couple of questions coming in, Brendan. If you don't mind, we'll go through these. Alvin Trace DC has asked, we're starting to look at scenario planning, resource planning for the future in our business. Do you have any specific advice regarding social distancing and how best to manage office environments? I'm presuming that question's in the context of the future when things come back to normal.
To be honest, I don't. I mean, I have a clinical background. It's a laboratory background. It's really, I suppose, public health need to make those calls, and I might be putting you wrong by giving you advice. I think physical distancing is going to be part of our lives almost automatically. I think people will just do it anyway for their own protection, for certainly the next year until we have an immunization program. But there'll always be flu. There'll always be. I mean, people die from flu, and people get very sick with flu. So I think it'll improve the immunization programs, and I'd say our flu uptake, our vaccine uptake, will be bigger next year. As regards laying out offices, I think it'll become part of project design, where you'll build in distance. It's probably already there, though. I think there's already distancing in most of the architectural drawings I see, but I wouldn't be able to give you any kind of more specific advice than that, and I'm sorry.
No, and you know what, I think what will happen is, we're all learning every single day. We're adapting every single day since this has come out. We're all moving in a new reality, and I think it'll become a national learning at that point. But thanks for Brendan for the little bit of advice. A different question. Why is Gemba so impactful? And are there other tools that you might think could be as impactful?
Well, there's two big reasons for me. When we started doing our Gemba walks in A&E several months ago, on more than one occasion, we were stopped by kind of senior people down there and said, it really makes a difference. I mean, you go down there, I'm not going to be able to do much for the people down in A&E in terms of looking after patients, but they felt more cut off previously, and I think they really valued senior management taking an interest in what was going on down there, and at least asking them how their day was going and whether it made a difference. Like just doing that. Senior walk-arounds alone is enough.
Brendan, sorry now to cut across you. I think your technical issues may be reappearing there.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
We can, yeah. I think you just had a glitch there, but please continue where you were.
Well, if you expect your staff to, to deal with the trolley crisis, the least you can do is be down there with them and, face the patients with them and support them and listen to what they have to say, because the staff on the ground, as you know, with Lean, staff on the ground always have the answers. They always do, and they're often simple answers. And you can imagine all sorts of solutions to things, but you're probably wrong unless you're actually working in the field and you know what you're doing. So that's been the value of Gemba, and I will certainly continue to do that. Yeah.
Brendan, can I just ask you a little bit of a side question? I'm just wondering, from the Gemba walks, there's a different type of pressure on the staff in A&E based on COVID-19, but it sounds like as if the filtering that you're doing is a sort of alleviating some of that stress. Are you finding that the environment is now a little bit more enjoyable for staff, considering, they don't have the trolley numbers or the pressure or that sort of environment to work in. It's just a more streamlined, better environment. Has this had a positive impact on the stress of the staff in the A&E?
I would say it certainly does. I mean, they have the additional stress of dealing with COVID, which is a worry for any of them who have, you know, families at home and that, and so on. But in terms of not having trolleys, in terms of being able to do what they're really trained to do and what they want to be doing full time, all the time, it's very good. They have the additional hassle of putting on and off the gear and so on, which is something. But I suppose maybe the biggest thing for them is that they have achieved this. I mean, I find as I move on in the organization, I have less that I can say I've done and more that I can say I've punctuated somebody else's story. And this is their story. They've made these changes. They brought in the COVID stream in outpatients. They designed the rooms. All we did was give them the space to do it, give them a bit of money to whatever gear they needed and so on. So I think they feel a sense of achievement. I think they feel a sense of fulfillment that they're actually, you know, doing something really good for patients, and that they're giving their best. So I'd say that's my impression of what's going on down there. I'm happy to be corrected, well, maybe not happy to be corrected, but that's my impression of it. Yeah.
Well, just one final question, Brendan. Mark said last week that if you can't make time now, you never will. And I suppose, you know, the question is, was there an appetite by staff in the midst of an emergency? Was it deemed relevant or important enough? How did you change the mindset to engage in lean now? And I suppose it's all about that engagement, that engagement level with the staff. How are you engaging with them to make sure that they understand that reducing waste or moving better and faster and more efficiently is now important?
Well, we didn't need to. It was already there. I mean, you know, even for those that weren't lean trained, a lot of this, as you know yourself, lean is often common sense. When you take a group, and if you're lean trained and you take a group who aren't, and you say, what are your problems and how would you fix them? And how would you characterize them? How would you measure them? How would you know you're after improving them? They're simple questions. They're only English, and people get it. So I think we're just leveraging what's already there. People always want to improve things. They usually know the answers. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's been my experience. I wouldn't say people think they've been through a lean revolution or evolution. I think they just think that they've been able to make changes that they thought were necessary. And maybe that's a good thing, that they don't feel they have to subscribe to one particular philosophy. I don't know, maybe think differently.
Brendan, has there been any key factors that have obviously contributed to the zero trolleys?
Well, certainly capacity and space has, and I suppose really the reduced presentations, which is also a worry. So typically on an average weekday, we'd have 200 presentations in the ED. It certainly halved in the first few weeks of this. And we were still converting, as we call it, in other words, admitting a significant number of patients who needed to be admitted. But there are probably patients, which is in the national kind of discourse on all of this, who have worries or concerns, maybe lumps or bumps or whatever else, that maybe haven't been presenting because they think their GP is too busy or they think the hospital is unsafe. We're doing everything we can to make sure the hospital is safe for those patients. GPs are open for business, and it's important. And it's started to ramp up again. So the activity has started to ramp up, which is a really good thing, and we welcome it. And we want to make sure that we keep that pull system going so we can keep pulling people up from A&E. We do not want to return to a place where we have trolleys. I'd love to promise that we can't do that, but I don't know.
Oh, Brendan, look, we'll close on that note, but sincerely, I want to thank you for your time, and to thank you and all your staff for doing an incredible job in helping protect us, but also keep us safe. And your efforts are not unappreciated for sure. So thank you for that. And thank you. I know you're an incredibly busy person, so to make time to be with all of us here today has been incredible. Just so you know, Brendan, there's a continuous stream of people thanking you for your time, telling you that it has been incredibly insightful. It has been excellent, that it's been fascinating to hear.
Well, we're humbled by that. Thank you very much. We're humbled, genuinely.
and thank you to everybody who's given. I'm going to relay all these positive sentiments to Brendan after it. I want to thank, just before we leave, I want to thank the forum, because the CUH have come to us once, and again they've come to us earlier this week in looking for help with resourcing PPE and different materials, and we've gone out to the forum and we've had a very positive response to that. Brenda, I'm sure you're aware that we've been in touch with Beth about that, and a number of our members have been able to come up trumps on that. We have another email that will go out, so I just want to thank the forum members for all that they've done on that regard.
And so do we. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes. And my thanks to Sen Noreen, who's been an admin on this afternoon's call. I want to thank everybody for their time. Like I said, this will be recorded and will be available and put up on the Lean Business Ireland website. The local forums, there are local forums all over the country, and they're carrying out some incredibly interesting and wonderful conversations online over these couple of weeks. Make sure to go to leanbusinessireland.ie, and at the top right hand corner you can press the join button, and that will allow you to get a notification of all the different types of events. There's a notification up there about next Thursday's event for sure. Brendan, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody here, and stay safe and stay well.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
All right. Thanks, Brendan.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.